host of this event. And in just a minute, I'll be introducing our folks here. So welcome. So what are we here for? I guess the question is, I've got some just general questions to get us rolling here. How many people here have a concern about the nature of the polarization that's taking place in our political? Okay, and well, I guess we're on the same page there. There's a lot of disagreement out there, and it's not happening in a very organized way. I'm with an organization called Braver Angels. I'll say a little bit more about that. But I moderate workshops which bring together people from opposing, polarized opposing points of view, particularly in politics. So not to change people's minds, not to persuade them that I'm my way or their way is better or worse, or even to debate, but rather to reach an understanding. The understanding that the person holding that view other than mine is a human being. They're not a demon, they're an actual human being for the most part, I've found. And once we've found, there's an amazing amount of agreement. And you can pick some difficult topics, some challenging topics. I think we've got some Braver Angels people here that have some more specific details than I do. But that's what I'm here for. Who's heard of ranked choice voting? Ranked choice. So a lot of hands. If you haven't, we're going to be covering that in specifics tonight, so we know pretty well what that is. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Just some thoughts. Does anybody have a strong opinion? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, so we got a little. All right, so we've got a little polarization around ranked choice voting. Who's heard of star voting? Okay, a lot of hands. If you haven't, it's going to be explained a little later. Thumbs up or thumbs down on star voting? A lot of thumbs up. I think we got a lot of representation, and you're going to hear from that point of view. And the term vote splitting, does that mean something to everybody? It was a little bit new to me because I was thinking I split my vote, I vote for two candidates. Well, that's exactly what it means on the candidate level. Our political views, let's call them liberal and conservative. If we've got two liberal candidates or two conservative candidates running, if that vote gets split between them, they're not going to have as much power. So these systems are looking at ways to reduce that. I think I'm preaching to the choir with respect to that. Let's go ahead and put our slide up there a little bit. Okay, so here's what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to introduce Braver Angels briefly. There's a couple of representatives we have from here you can talk to other. We're going to hear from some other organizations that are representing the various voting types. Then we're going to have a fireside chat with Sarah Wolk. Sarah's here representing the Equal Vote Coalition, and I'll give her a formal introduction in a minute. And then there'll be some time for Q&A. So our objective is look kind of our time frame. You can see we're already a little behind schedule, but that shouldn't be a problem with this group. I think we're going to be just fine. So if you have questions in Q&A, we can hold them to the end. There'll be some things that you're going to probably want to ask about. Okay. So let's briefly, Braver Angels. I just want to make sure I've got some notes here. How many are familiar with Braver Angels? Oh, excellent. Okay, then I can go pretty quickly, but we're a nationally organized but grassroots organization. We've got 127 alliances nationwide, each alliance founded by people of opposite political views. So in order to form an alliance with Braver Angels, we've got to have at least a liberal and a conservative view at the top of the organization. And then we strive to maintain a relative balance throughout the organizations. Every 127 of those are around the country right now. Our mission could be described in two words: courageous citizenship. And one of the courage that we really focus on is the courage to be able to have the conversations that are difficult. Specifically, our vision is in America where courageous citizenship is the honored norm, renewing civic culture and building trust across political differences. We came out of the 2016 election, Clinton-Trump. There was a huge polarization in the country, and it's particularly in a small town in Ohio. Some of you may have seen a documentary about it. Our two gentlemen, Bill Doherty from the University of Minnesota, professor and marriage family therapist, counselor, and Dave Blankenhorn, representing a more conservative view, brought together 8 Republicans, 8 Trump voters, and 8 Hillary voters in a town that was horribly polarized. Went through a process very similar to what was designed in marriage therapy, and it turned out to be so successful with those 8 individuals, and indeed in that community, that we've continued the process moving forward. 6,000 events to date, 15,000 members worldwide. So that's Braver Angels. Now we'd like to hear briefly from the other representatives that are here. So make sure everybody's here, and what we do is we can get you a microphone. We've got one right up here. We can get. So we got from the Unurban Cafe. Let's get Robert up here first. He's kind of our host. Yeah. Thank you. We're here. Got something we'd like y'all to know about here.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. This is the Unurban Cafe, where there's so much going on here. Great food and great meetings. We have all sorts of activist groups meet. There's music. Friday nights we have an open mic here. There's concerts that happen that are on Saturday nights. But the gem of this place is Pam has always been open to very diverse groups and great conversation. I was in a screenwriting group here. I run a group called Freedom Rising and Unurban Activists Unite. So we bring together all sorts of activists, and we meet on the second Saturday and the fourth Saturday of the month here. So it's just a great meeting place. I encourage you to have meetings here and come support the Unurban. The lockdown was particularly hard on Pam and this place because we were allowed to be open. So now we're struggling to keep going. So any kind of support you can have for the Unurban is greatly appreciated. And anytime you want to have a meeting here, please come.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah. So, Center for Election Science, Michael Ravinsky. Mike, we got a microphone for you, and would you just give about a minute introduction about who you are and what your organization does?
Yeah, I'll be brief. Hi, my name is Michael Ravinsky. I chair the board of directors of a national nonprofit called the Center for Election Science. We are a democracy reform organization, and we advocate for a particular voting method called approval voting, because we feel it is not only one of the very best voting methods, it's also hands down the easiest to implement and the least expensive, and that is where our focus is. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. Thanks for being here. And so, approval voting, any questions? This is your man, Michael Ravinsky.
What is approval voting?
So there's more of us here. Alan is also with the California Approves, which is a California organization. Approval voting is, so you'll hear what STAR is. Approval voting is, it is exactly the same as the voting method we have now, where you have a list of candidates and you have boxes next to their names, and you check a box, except under approval voting you are not limited to only supporting one candidate. You can support as many candidates as you want, or as few as you want. So you can basically go down a list of any number of candidates and do thumbs up, thumbs down for each one. And this allows you to get a true and accurate measure of every candidate's support, as opposed to under plurality voting, which is the current system. You only get to support one candidate, and then you can't say anything about anybody else, which leads to a system where you only have two candidates, because it doesn't work when there's more than two, because of vote splitting. Yes?
Should I save a follow-up question for later when it's more?
I'm all good. I don't want to hog the mic.
Let's do that for the Q&A. Then we can get these guys will be here for that. Thank you very much.
You're going to talk more about that too.
Yeah. Well, Sarah's going to share her perspective on it, and then we'll get some balance with Michael as well. Thanks, Michael. And Alan's here. Yeah, Alan from California Approves.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Alan Savage, and I'm the president of California Approves, as was mentioned. We are also an approval voting organization. We are a political committee in California, which means that we can spend money on campaigns and politicians who might support approval voting or star voting for that matter. We are a member of the Equal Vote Coalition, and we are so grateful to be here and that you have put on this event. And we're very grateful to Braver Angels and Unurban for being here. It's wonderful to see how our missions align. It's really all about breaking this polarization that we have in the United States and learning to move forward together. And I think changing our voting institutions, having our institutions support us cooperating, will really be a game changer for us. Thank you.
Andre.
Yeah, Andre.
It's just coming up. I I want to just make a point to say, if you think about what we're doing, there's an agreement about the polarization, right? I'm here with Braver Angels, and our work is in having those conversations and bridging that divide in between. We're hearing about approval methods, star voting, ranked choice, and approval, ways of changing our actual voting process to decrease that polarization, increasing conversations, decreasing polarization, and political parties. So with that, I'd like to bring Andre up and have him tell us a little bit about Forward Party and what's going on with you.
Thanks, Link. I really appreciate it. And honestly, hats off to everyone who's here tonight for really caring about our country and our democracy, and finding ways that we can really make meaningful change and improve the electability of people who are really more broadly popular, right? Because I think that's one of the problems that we run into these days, is that we're electing people who maybe have a small core of supporters, right? Maybe only 10 or 15%, but because their 10 or 15, 20% is more than the next person's 15 or 17 or 10 or 8, they're getting elected, even though they don't have a lot of second choice popularity, even though almost nobody would have them as their second choice, right? But if those second choices start to matter, right, if we start making those have some weight, then we can start creating paths for electability for people who are more broadly popular. Maybe they're not everyone's first choice, like a Bernie Sanders, maybe they're not but they're a lot of people's second choice. That's compromise. That's democracy, right? And we love that. So I work with the Forward Party of California. We are associated with the Forward Party nationally. You might have seen us. And we really believe at the Forward Party that America deserves multi-party democracy, right? One of the things that our founding fathers warned us against was the political divide and partisanship that could rip our country apart. And they accurately predicted that. We're seeing it in real time, right? And a lot of this stems down to, like, as you all have recognized, to the way that we vote. And the problem with the way that we vote these days is our voting system was invented 300 years ago, right? It's like Windows 1776. You know what I mean? We should be on iOS 2026. You know what I mean? We have the election science now. We know that there are better ways to really accurately gauge the voter sentiment, not just for one candidate, but for all the candidates, right? And so this is why these types of things, and this is what we're promoting at the Forward Party, because we believe that our country would be better if every elected person had a different political party. Then the parties wouldn't matter, right? Then they wouldn't be beholden to a higher political party powder. They'd be beholden to their constituents, which is how it should be. So that's one thing that we're promoting, and actually one thing that I'm promoting right now as I run for mayor of Los Angeles. So I'm currently a candidate in the 2026 Los Angeles mayor. Very kind. I'm a candidate because I haven't, I was born and raised here, and I haven't been seeing the kind of change from people, from our leadership, that we really need to create a democracy that's going to start really representing us and our sentiments. And so I'm a big proponent of these kinds of election systems reforms that will help that, right? So that when there is somebody who's maybe not everybody's first choice, but there are a lot of people's second choice, that will help get them a pathway towards electability, right? And I think that's good for all of us. So, one of the things that you may or may not know, but the city of Los Angeles is currently undergoing charter reform, right? That's our city constitution. And one of the things that they're considering is how to update the voting systems. And they've already started to consider ranked choice voting as one of those. And I think that's a great first step. You know what I mean? I think that any consideration of the idea even that we can improve the way we vote, that's a good first step. But I also want to encourage them to start thinking to the next step. And so that's what I'm going to do. That's what I plan to do as I talk to the people, is promote the idea that we can have a better democracy if we just promote multi-choice voting systems. So thank you all.
Just to reiterate, I think that the point, I just want to also say, we talked about there's different approaches to making depolarizing our organization, making our country more fair and representative of all of us. And there's also, if you look around the room, there's a group of folks here who have that, at some level, some sense of that's important enough work to get out and come out to the Unurban Cafe and make that happen. So I want to acknowledge everybody who's here. I'd like to, I think we have a next slide. Yes, the Equal Vote Coalition. I'm very interested to hear about this, so I'd like to introduce Sarah Wolf. She's our guest today. Say a few things about Sarah. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Equal Vote Coalition and the Star Voting Action Group. These are organizations whose mission is to promote true equality in the voting process itself. She and these organizations conduct and support research. They educate communities like ours here tonight, and they build coalitions that empower honesty, equality, accuracy, expressiveness, and simplicity in our voting process, locally, statewide, and federally. So let's give a welcome to Sarah. Thank you. And I'm just going to bring this over here so I don't have to hold it, and I can have my prepared questions ready for our guest speaker. We're going to put her on the firing line here. So I'm looking at this approved list of questions, but I want to say the first one I'm going to ask is, what's your story, Sarah? How did you get involved with this whole process? I mean, what got you started?
So, like many or most of us here tonight, I started as a volunteer. I was always really, really fascinated with systems design. Got into permaculture design, working in environmentalism, working in sustainable agriculture, sustainable architecture, and with any system, it's like the way that we design our larger systems really creates the fabric of our society. It creates our behaviors. So when I, turned 18 and came of age to vote, it was quite a dynamic election. We had Ralph Nader on the ballot. We had a whole thing go down there. And I was like, oh my God, our system is so broken. There are these just wildly perverse incentives to vote for the front runner on my side who I think can win instead of voting my conscience. And if we can't vote our conscience, is it really even democracy? I would say, it's a start. At least we have a vote. And the right to vote itself is very fundamental, but it really is only the first step in the voting rights movement. So I learned about ranked choice voting first, and I met this canvasser. He was like, this is amazing, it's going to change everything. With ranked choice voting, you rank your candidates first, second, third. If your favorite can't win, your vote transfers to your next choice. So it's safe to vote your conscience. You don't have to worry about wasting your vote on a third-party candidate like Ralph Nader, for example. I think he was a Green Party canvasser. And I was like, amazing, I'm going to get involved with this when I have a little more time. So fast forward a couple of years, and I came back to Portland, Oregon, where I'm from, and I was like, things are getting spicy. Trump had just gotten elected. Everything was very, very heated, heightened, and so I was like, who's working on this ranked choice voting thing? I connected with a group, Ranked Choice Voting Oregon, went to a big meeting downtown, and the presenter who was kind of hosting the thing gave that same pitch. Rank your candidates. If your favorite can't win, your vote goes to your next choice. So you can vote your conscience, you get majority winners. And up in the audience, this guy was like, hi, my name's Aaron Wolf, and thank you for the great presentation, but actually. So he very politely fact-checked her. He was like, it is safer to vote your conscience if there's only 2 viable front-runners, and you don't have to worry about voting for a third-party candidate who's non-viable, but you do maybe have to worry if they are viable. And there are actually some voter error issues where, it's not wasting your vote in the way that you were thinking, but it can waste it in these other ways. And the room kind of erupted. There was a whole, is not, is to, and I raised my hand. And I was like, I've read all this stuff from this organization, Fair Vote. I've been following this for years. You're wrong, dude. And then other people were like, no, he's right. And other people were like, no, she's right. And so a number of us were like, as a movement, how are we going to get anything done if we don't have agreement on the facts? These are just basic facts of the election science. This is a wonky topic, but if we want to be effective on anything else, we need to get the right answers, and ultimately it is just math. So I volunteered to chair a research committee, and something amazing happened in that process. We started off with, we're going to get agreement on the facts. We're going to have a democratic process where we hash out the details. We convene a forum. We chatted online and we shared citations, and we decided to start with the why. We adopted 5 principles of what our voting method should do before we decided on what that voting method was. And those 5 principles became the 5 pillars of the Equal Vote Coalition. So a voting method should be equal. It should guarantee every voter an equally weighted vote, an equal voice, which is the legal definition of one person, one vote. It should be accurate. It should accurately represent the will of the voters. It should empower honesty. It should be safe to vote your conscience. You shouldn't have to worry about what other people are going to do. It should empower honest, expressive voting. And it should be expressive enough that you can show your full nuanced opinion, at least to the degree that the voting method needs to find the right winner, while still being simple. And that was our 5th keystone. It's like, it needs to be user-friendly. People need to understand how to do it. It needs to be easy to tally. It needs to be easy to audit. It needs to be transparent. If people don't trust the voting method itself, we have nothing. And that process changed my mind. I realized I had read a bunch of propaganda. Long story short, our organization, RCV Oregon, voted by supermajority to go forward with star voting, which I'm going to talk about more. But
Well, let's move into that a little bit, because now I think you've set the groundwork for how you got to where you are. The question I would have, and maybe we all might have, is from a Braver Angels perspective, how does our voting system contribute to the polarization within? We were talking about changing the system. I'd like to know maybe, what is it about the current system that causes the polarity that we experience?
yeah, so our current system, where you choose one candidate only, no matter how many candidates are on the ballot, it works perfectly great if there are only 2 candidates in the election, or if there's only 2 parties. If you only have 2 options, you get a guaranteed majority preferred winner, you get an easy outcome. But all of a sudden, if you have a coalition of good guys, you have like 5 good guys running against 1 bad guy, that like super majority of good guys can split the vote. So you get 10%, 20%, 30%, and somebody with even a minority of the vote who's opposed by the majority can win. So that's a phenomenon called vote splitting that is just bad math. We need voting methods that work when there are lots of candidates on the ballot. We need voting methods that work when there are lots of political parties and political interest groups. We need to empower and support coalition in our politics.
So theoretically, if there were 9 candidates voting, a ranked system or a star system, well, you're going to explain these systems, right? But that would enable me to say, okay, I like this guy, I like this policy, I like this is a party that represents, say, the climate in a way that's really important to me, but I hate to vote for them because that's taking the vote away from the person I really need to be in office for the social point of view, right? So
exactly. And I think we've all experienced that, like, don't vote lesser evil, don't vote for Jill Stein, that's a vote for the Republicans, or don't vote Libertarian, that's a vote for the Democrats.
right.
So we absolutely can do better. The Equal Vote Coalition recommends kind of a slate of different voting methods, and our kind of central message is whether you prefer a traditional looking ballot, whether you prefer a ranked ballot, whether you prefer a snazzy 5-star ballot, as we're going to get into, there is a way to fill out and tally that ballot that guarantees an equally weighted vote. So, for fans of the traditional looking ballot on the left, we have approval voting represented by Alan Savage, California Approves here, and Michael Ravinsky, Center for Election Science. And that is just a simple upgrade to our voting method that guarantees an equally weighted vote, eliminates vote splitting, is accurate with lots of candidates in the race. There's also a score ballot, which is an interesting idea. So that's kind of taking the 5-star rating and saying, 5 stars for my favorite, 0 stars for my last choice, And I'm actually able to show, who's my second choice, who's my third choice, but also how much or how little do I like these different options. So is my second choice almost as good as my favorite? Give them 4 stars. Are they actually tied for favorite? I have multiple favorites. Amazing. That'd be fantastic if we had multiple wonderful candidates on our ballot. In star voting, you can show that. And then, or with a 5-star ballot, you can show that. And then on the ranking side, it's just simple preference order.
Well, that makes a heck of a lot of sense to me, Sarah. So what's the resistance to this? Why is this not whether we like one of these 3 these perspectives, these different ways, it seems pretty obvious to me that works better than the system that's giving us these split candidates. What's the resistance to this?
Well, like anything in policy or politics, the devil is really in the details. So I think when I first got involved, I had heard of ranked choice voting, and most people have only heard of ranked choice voting. And the way that I'm gonna set my notes down somewhere else over there. But yeah, with ranked choice voting, the way it's tallied actually doesn't count most of the rankings on your ballot. And that fundamentally creates a whole chain reaction of issues in the system. So with traditional ranked choice voting, the way it's being promoted all over the country, you rank your candidates first, second, third, fourth. If you rank candidates equally, that can void your ballot. That's a really common voter error. And then you only count the top ranked candidate. If then they eliminate the candidate who is in last place, and they transfer your vote to your next choice if possible. In some cases, partway down the process, your next choice will have already been eliminated, so your vote won't be able to transfer. And so that can cause a bunch of really sideways, kind of counterintuitive outcomes. And this is not the details that we want to be telling people on the street. Like when we're trying to tell people about let's upgrade our voting method to something more expressive, more robust, it shouldn't be introducing new problems along the way. Research has been in pretty near consensus that it's one of the more outdated, clunky, kind of problematic ways to go. So it's been a real journey for us to try and take this kind of lay of the land and say, we wish there was just one simple answer, but in fact, if we want to get anything done here, we kind of need to pivot as a movement away from outdated reforms that have already been kind of debunked or disproven, and towards reforms that actually can stand up to some tire kicking, that actually deliver on the talking points. So, yeah.
Yeah. So there's resistance just from this is the way we've always done it, and I think that's certainly a familiarity for me. That I know how to vote. I'm looking at I'm going to look at a entirely different ballot, so I can see where that'd be a difficult thing to implement. Would it be difficult for voters to figure this out in the ballot box? And people who, I'm like me sometimes in local elections. I don't even think about it until it's time to vote. I look at the candidate, I look at the sheet, I fill it out, and I voted, right? Is this going to be confusing for people, do you think?
So the idea with star voting is that it actually is mirroring the natural expression of human opinion. So humans already are opinionated creatures. We have nuanced thoughts on many topics, especially politics. We don't necessarily feel comfortable expressing those views at the Thanksgiving table, but we do have ideas of this candidate is my favorite, 5 stars. These ones are also really good, like this voter on the screen, 4 stars for both Carmen and David. Erin is kind of a lesser evil. We prefer her over Blake, but not by much. Hopefully it doesn't come down to that. And so star voting just allows you to, whatever your nuanced opinion rating has been used all over the world by millions, if not, millions and millions of people.
Okay, there's a concern, it has been voiced over the last two elections about election fraud. Without taking a position on whether it was or wasn't fraudulent in spots, are these systems equally challengeable on that issue of fraud, or is there a more transparency that's available to us? How do they compare it with that potential concern?
Yeah, it is a really big concern, obviously. It's one that's has the potential to tear our country apart. And it's one of the reasons that we do support voting methods that count all of the data on your ballot, that are robust and simple to tally, that are transparent. So with star voting, for example, the way it's tallied is you take the scores on your ballots, add them up, it's all just basic addition. You find the 2 highest scoring candidates overall, and those are your finalists, and then your vote automatically goes to whichever finalist you prefer. You don't have to vote again, your ballot already shows which finalist you scored higher. So you end up basically with just a 2-round process, where in the first round you add up the stars, in the second round you add up the votes, and the finalist preferred by more voters wins. So that's very transparent, it's very easy to do, it's very easy to audit, to tabulate, the whole 9 yards. Approval voting also is just tallied with basic addition, and so both of these methods really naturally conform to all of our best practices for election integrity and election security. Unfortunately, that's not the case with ranked choice voting.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because I did a little homework getting ready for this event with you. And given, what do you got to say, the recent events with ranked choice voting, for example, it's been banned in 17 states. It's been repealed in 19 jurisdictions where it was implemented. 2024, just 2 years ago, voters voted against it in 5 out of the 6 states where it was on the ballot, and thus it's controversial. And but that's the only one people seem to know about. People are pretty familiar with it. So, how would you address those concerns, and where do we go from there? If the people aren't ready to implement something, it seems like it's going to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in 2016, when I first got really involved, there were a couple of different groups. There was the Center for Election Science, the newly formed Equal Vote Coalition, and they were really blowing the whistle on ranked choice voting at that time, particularly in smaller election science communities, saying, we shouldn't be pushing a reform that requires centralization of the ballots, that introduces some serious new deal breakers in the process of getting really incremental gains in one area. That trade-off just doesn't pencil out. And they were pretty well ignored by the larger political establishment. And then Alaska happened. First Burlington happened, then Alaska happened. So in Alaska, they were the second state to implement ranked choice voting statewide. And the very first election, essentially everything that we had said would go wrong went wrong. It was the exact worst case scenario where there were 3 frontrunners who were all competitive, 2 Republicans versus 1 Democrat. The 2 Republicans split the vote, and even though 60% of voters had ranked one of those Republicans first choice, a Democrat won. Democrats were like, fantastic, we won. We love this new system. But obviously in somewhere that's kind of left-leaning, supermajority like California or Oregon, where I'm from, this could easily just as easily happen in reverse. So all of the talking points that I had been sold on were proven false. Ranking your first choice honestly in first place actually did backfire for a number of people. There were really high rates of wasted votes that didn't transfer and weren't able to be counted in that final round. Ballots were like float planed and trucked into a central location. There were massive delays in actually getting the results back. And so unsurprisingly, the Republican Party pushed back and made it their number 2 priority to ban ranked choice voting nationally. And they did not attack the problem with a scalpel. They attacked it with a sledgehammer. So to date, 17 states have banned ranked choice voting, and 2 of those bans actually took out approval voting as well, despite the fact that approval voting doesn't have any of these issues, that approval voting was specifically promoted as an alternative to deliver on the goals behind ranked choice voting while addressing the criticisms. And we're seeing that threaten star voting and also ranked robin, another one of our, good top shelf voting methods. There are a lot of great voting methods out there that don't have these problems. And the fact that the money in politics is supporting ranked choice voting, something that's kind of like a black box and oversold, it really is a critical moment for the voting reform movement as a whole, where if we don't differentiate, if we don't pivot as a movement, and if all of us little dogs don't work together to say, we all agree on the science here. We might like approval voting because it's the simplest, most traditional looking ballot. We might like star voting because we think it has the best path forward and we think it's the most robust. But no matter which type of ballot we want, the bigger question is, how do we ensure that every voter has an equally weighted vote? How do we uphold the gold standard of one person, one vote? How do we keep this a bipartisan movement? Because everyone needs better collective decisions. Everyone needs better representation.
Yeah, and so the question I have though, just I want to be clear, so ranked choice voting was tried, everything that could go wrong went wrong. So if I'm understanding correctly, so let's correct me for everybody, ranked choice seemed to have the most name recognition. People had heard that the most, so that sort of became the umbrella term for election reform. And now we have some different perspectives that actually work more effectively and better.
Yeah, so I think the better umbrella term is alternative voting methods. Ranked choice voting is really a name brand for one specific model that
It has the name recognition.
that has some issues. If we want to be more inclusive of just ranked ballot methods, we recommend calling that just ranked voting. And there are some better ways to do that. Again, the main difference is that you actually should count all the rankings voters put down.
So here's a question, how is your Equal Vote organization collaborating or working with all these other organizations that may be advocating for different alternative methods?
Yeah, so I think with what we're seeing on the national stage with, the 2014 election cycle saw massive money spent on ranked choice in dozens and dozens of states. Wherever it was on the ballot statewide, they lost pretty badly. And there was also been a lot of repeals. So we're kind of seeing ranked choice, which was we just have to go with the name recognition, that's what everyone else is doing. Momentum was for years what we were shut down with. And we were no, we really have to get this right. But that actually presents a really important moment in the electoral reform space where kind of the standard bearer has been kind of revealed to be a bit of an emperor with no clothes. And here we are with better alternatives. So it's a really important time for the approval voting community, the star voting community, and the ranked robin, better ranked voting community to join together to cite each other, to just say, they're right on these facts, they're right on the story, and make sure that we actually pivot as a movement and kind of work together to tackle this larger Goliath.
So how do you see this, if in your best ideal world, Sarah, how would you see this unfolding? At the local level, maybe the school board election or a community election, or it's a big, huge plan to get this on a national election or a statewide election. Where do you see it really taking hold, where people begin to see this happening?
Well, we have a grassroots project, so we have volunteers all over the country working on local chapters. Our LA chapter is incredible. As Andre said, voting reform is on the LA Charter Commission's agenda for this election cycle. So we really need them to pivot. Don't just do what everyone else is doing. Don't just go with the name recognition. Give star voting and approval voting time of day. And then we've got committees as well that are working on all the other pieces of the puzzle that a campaign needs to be successful, whether that's writing articles, doing research, doing software development, doing outreach to local organizations, because we're not going to get voting reform to happen if we don't have, the local interest groups and, whether it be Forward Party or NAACP or Common Cause, all League of Women Voters. These are all established organizations that that need to be pulling together, and we need to be there to tell them what they need to know about this issue. It is obviously a little bit wonky. So,
Wonky's a good word,
It's
but
a little
you're clarifying it for us, I think, in a way. I can see if there's anything else we really want to cover here. Okay, how are you collaborating local or national level? So what I'm hearing is even before we get into try to get elections changed, we get to organizations that are involved politically, League of Women Voters, Common Cause, any political organization, irrespective of its political polarity. Once they understand this process, your view is, and I think I'm inclined to share it, once it's understood, that they'd be inclined to be more supportive of it and maybe take initiative from their organization through their organization. Is that your hope?
right, yeah. So we've got a new website that we're launching. It's called bettervoting.com. And on that website, you can use star voting for your organization to do their internal elections or to vote on their logo or to make any sort of decision, whether it be where should we go on family
My
vacation.
condominium association could go to this website and implement this voting process when we elect a new chairman, a new executive person.
Exactly, yeah, and we have a bunch of different top shelf voting methods that you can try for yourself. So that is one of the easiest ways to make a difference in this, is to be effective in your own community. Trial these voting methods, normalize them in your own community, and see for yourself what you like and how it works. We are a volunteer-led organization, so whatever skill sets you have, we can absolutely put them to work, whether it's writing or software development or outreach or dozens of other little projects we've got going. There's really, really brilliant people all over the world that are working on this, and we do need your help. It's not something we can get done on our own.
Well, thank you for spearheading this initiative from your end. Is there anything else that wasn't covered on my question list here that you think you might want to share? Maybe any of your notes or anything? And then what we can do is open it up to questions. People have questions and the voting methods of representatives. So anything else?
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about the electoral reform landscape in general, our website for that is equal.vote. That's the Equal Vote Coalition. And star voting, again, is our flagship recommendation when we look at all of the different considerations. If we could just have our cake and eat it too. Star voting is already constitutional in all 50 states. It addresses all the concerns of the anti-ranked choice voting people while delivering on all of the goals of the pro-RCV people. So we really do think that that's just one super adaptable, super robust reform that could help make us more effective on every other issue.
Thank you. So I think can we just acknowledge Sarah, and then let's continue with the conversation. So that the agenda calls for some Q&A at this point. Let's open it up for some questions and maybe some informal discussion. I saw a hand up here, and then was it Robert, right? Yeah. Robert, and then a gentleman here. So yeah, question for Sarah.
Yeah, are there examples where this has worked already? You said it's worldwide.
Yeah.
Do we have
Yeah, make sure, you know what, I don't know if we need the microphone if you speak up. So the question is,
And I can repeat the question just so we have it on camera. But you said, are there examples of where this has been tried in the real world? Yes. So star voting has been used statewide by the Independent Party of Oregon for their primary. The Democratic Party of Oregon has used it for their presidential delegate elections, so electing the delegates to the National Convention. The Python community just recently used star voting for their internal elections. So that's
is
the
everybody familiar
Python
with the
programming
Python?
level.
We don't know what snake people.
Yeah. So the sorry, I kind of garbled my words there, but Python is one of the leading software development languages that programmers use to write code, and so for people in the software development community, that is a huge deal and a big organization that has a lot of influence. And we're really excited to see them use star voting. We've got unions using it. We've got all sorts of political organizations and political parties around the world using it. And we just had star voting used to elect our first sitting government official in Astoria, Oregon. So that's super exciting.
Was there some examples? Yeah. Thank you, Robert. Let's so we can get this on. We're being recorded for Sarah, so we're going to stand by Robert a microphone and then.
I can talk loud enough.
Right. Okay. And she'll yeah.
What
Okay.
about the electoral college?
So electoral reform is a big puzzle, and in order to solve all of the problems and deliver like a fully equal vote, the electoral college is part of the puzzle. So is the Senate, so is gerrymandering, so is money in politics, and of course like voter disenfranchisement and just barriers to voting in the first place. So the reason that we focus on the voting method itself is because this is something that doesn't require a constitutional amendment. To abolish the electoral college is a multi-generational task where we would need a supermajority of states. It's just really, really, really difficult, if not impossible to do. And whereas something like adopting star voting, we can already do this right now. We can do it at the local level, but we could do it for all of our elections in the United States of America. And every time that our presidential elections have failed to elect the candidate who is preferred by a majority, it wasn't just the electoral college that failed. It was actually vote splitting between like the Democratic Party and the Green Party in the Ralph Nader scenario, or between the Republican Party and Ross Perot. So both major parties have lost the presidency because of vote splitting. And this is the problem that is just easily solved with approval voting, star voting, or ranked robin.
So if you had enough people, it would override the electoral college issue?
Yeah. How would it work in the context of the electoral college? That's a pretty sophisticated question. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead and take it. How would it work with the electoral college?
So star voting could be used for presidential elections. Each state would adopt star voting at the statewide level, and then currently most states are winner take all. So if California adopted star voting, then all of California's electors would go to the winner of star voting. We actually have an interstate compact where if different states were to adopt, like, one state uses approval voting and another uses star and another uses ranked choice, there's a method for how you can kind of tabulate all of those in an integrated way, identify the two front runners, and then allocate the votes to the finalist who's preferred by the majority. So there is a good workaround. It is a little wonky in the details just because the Electoral College is already very wonky in the details, but we have a page on that on the website at starvoting.org.
So that's a good challenge. Thank you. And a question over here, yeah. And then tomorrow, we'll get.
You mentioned that there were issues with ranked choice voting where people had ballots where they couldn't figure out how to fill them out correctly. Does that problem occur in star voting?
So in star voting, any way you fill out your ballot is essentially valid. You could, of course, take a Sharpie across your ballot and draw a picture of Hello Kitty, and that would be a voided ballot. But the most common voter error with ranked choice voting is if you score two candidates equally, especially your first choice, that would void your whole ballot. But in star voting, you're allowed to say, these two are both my favorites. I give them both 5 stars. This one's 4 stars. In star voting, also, you don't have to use every single available rating. In ranked choice voting, if you were to rank your candidates first choice, third choice, fourth choice, or if you skip some of the rankings, that can void your ballot depending on the jurisdiction. And that's another thing that's just totally allowed and totally fine on a star ballot. So the instructions for star voting are super simple. Give your favorite 5 stars, give your last choice 0, score other candidates as desired, equal scores are allowed, blank equals 0. And whether or not you even follow those instructions, your vote can still be counted. And then in that runoff step, there's an extra safeguard where no matter what scores you gave those finalists, your ballot equals 1 vote, and every ballot is equally powerful to everybody else's ballot. So no matter what scores you gave originally, it's just got that built-in safeguard where you don't have to strategically score somebody higher or lower, because ultimately your ballot's still going to count as 1 vote, just like it does now in a top 2 runoff in California.
Thank you. Yeah, question here, and then back there, and then up here.
So does the star voting, do you need to do a runoff? Do you need to do another election? So does that complicate things?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So star voting actually stands for score then automatic runoff, STAR. So the automatic top 2 runoff that you have there, you don't have to vote again. Your ballot already shows which finalist you preferred if you have a preference between them. So you don't have to have a second election. There are reasons why you might want to have a primary that narrows it down, but in that case, instead of narrowing it down to just the top 2 candidates, we could have a primary that narrows it down to the top 5 candidates or something like that, just so that it's not an overwhelming ballot with a sea of names. That may be worth having in somewhere like LA, where you do have lots of great candidates and lots of competitive elections.
So we don't have to, it wouldn't be necessary, but it's available if it's appropriate.
And
Yeah.
does that replace the primary process?
Yeah, so star voting could be used with or without a primary. The advantage of the primary is it helps narrow down the sea of candidates, but star voting is highly accurate with any number of candidates, so you could just skip the primary altogether and go straight to the general election. And that's a choice that each jurisdiction should make.
Great. It's a question at the back here. And
Are
then
you
Dana.
suggesting more of a proportional representation system in the US instead? Do you think it will work? Because with the US being so large, I think there will be more coalition between smaller parties.
Yeah, great question. So she asked about proportional representation and if we think that that is a piece of the puzzle here. So what I've been talking about so far is essentially star voting for single winner elections, like mayor, for example, perfect example, or city council, District 1. But in lots of Europe and around the world, people use what's called proportional representation, which is a multi-winner system in which if you have 10% of the vote, your party would win 10% of the seats in Parliament or seats in the House. And star voting is fully compatible with proportional representation. We have people working on that in countries that have a parliamentary system. So, long story short, yes, you can do star voting in a parliamentary system. LA is, I think, considering proportional representation just for LA City Council, and if they did that, they could do proportional star voting.
Thank you. Yeah, Alan's got a question, be patient, and then here, and then under.
I'm thinking of the polarization that we have now and how these things are supposed to unite us, and I'm wondering if you can walk us through if there's a very polarized election, like there's a red guy and a blue guy and a purple guy, and the red guy 50% of the people love and they hate the blue guy, and the blue guy 50% of the people love him but they hate the red guy, and everybody's like kind of pretty okay with the purple guy. How does the purple guy fare in star and approval and ranked choice voting and what we have today?
Yeah, so our current system, like I said, is only accurate with 2 candidates on the ballot, and 2 parties is what kind of devolves out of that math. So if you have a candidate in the center, your purple candidate with the current system, they have to compete with the guy on the left, but they also have to compete with the guy on the right. So they're kind of surrounded, they're getting ganged up on, and they are just statistically way less likely to win, even if they had just as much support as their competitors. So that's a phenomenon called the center squeeze spoiler effect, where it's just kind of the worst, most polarizing type of spoiler effect. So with approval voting, you could say, you know, my favorite's this guy on the left, but I also really love this person in the middle, and they're so reasonable, and I think they could really work together with the larger coalition. I think they could be more effective. They're really professional, and so I'll approve both. And then the guy on the right might say the same. This is my favorite, but I prefer, but I also support the guy in the middle, who I think would represent everyone really well. So in a system like approval voting, that consensus candidate would win if they had enough support to do so. They would certainly have an equal level playing field to compete on. And with star voting, rank robin, all the methods we support do elect that consensus candidate who best represents the electorate at large, not just the person who represents the biggest faction. And ranked choice, since it's actually counted like a series of choose one traditional elections, it actually has that same center squeeze polarization built into it as the current system, unfortunately.
Great question, Alan. We get the answer. Yeah, this question back here.
Yeah, so earlier you talked about how STAR is much more robust at avoiding like voided ballots, invalid ballots. But is there any research or studies done on making sure that people, when they fill out their ballot, that it's actually conveying their intent, right? That it's maybe not void, but maybe they filled it out improperly and it's saying something they didn't want it to say. Is there any research on that?
Yeah, so that's really not so much a question of like the voting method itself, but the voter education campaign, which can't be underestimated. So anytime we're rolling out a new system, and especially if we're rolling out a new different ballot that people aren't familiar with, we want to have very, very robust voter education, community outreach, meeting people where they are. We want to have, you know, people in libraries that can sit with you, and, you know, we want to make sure that we have voter education materials in every language. We want to have test elections where people can like try it out on something lower stakes and get familiar. So that is really, really important. Equal Vote is totally committed to helping support and fund those voter education efforts. And it's actually something that we're specifically fundraising for. So we have an Equal Vote Voter Implementation Fund, and if you donate to that, that money will be only spent on making sure that star voting, when it's adopted, is implemented really well. We have great, robust training materials, and then of course you can do exit voters after about what was their experience, how did they feel about it, and iterate to make sure that that's done perfectly. Because the actual like logistical cost to upgrade to star voting or to approval voting is pretty trivial. Our existing voting machines and voting tabulation software would just require like a super simple software upgrade and a recertification, which is part of the regular incremental process. So that's kind of like a one-time cost, but the voter education is something that is ongoing, that needs to be done really well, and that we're super committed to.
That's what I would say, is it's nice to have great vision, and vision can drive us and move us forward. I think there's some vision, I'm happy for here, what could happen. This transition process though, there's an education base to it that you're driving, and that's going to help that make them go on.
Yeah.
Question here, Susan?
My question kind of dovetails on that. I see the simplicity of approval voting, and I think, boy, that looks like there'd be a whole lot less friction to implementing it, because it's so straightforward. It looks like just like our ballots are now. I think I could explain it in 2
Can you
seconds
put that
to
slide up
anybody.
again? The various different voting, just put the slide up that shows the ballot.
And I'm hearing
Yep.
it solves a lot of the same problems that
Thank you.
star voting solves. So why wouldn't we go with a more simple approach? Or can you help me?
Yeah,
through
so if there was a magic button I could push, and just overnight, without anyone going to the polls or doing anything, we just suddenly had a better voting method all over the world, that would be approval voting. Because there are really no cons, there are only pros, it would make things better. It's simple, it's transparent, like you said. For voters like me, so one of the things I actually like the best about approval voting is that it kind of under promises and over delivers. So for me as a voter, I want to be able to show this is my favorite, who I love, this person's 4 stars. I want to be able to show my preference order, and in approval voting I can't show, this is my favorite, this is my lesser evil, I'm approving them too. They're just both approved. So it leaves me wanting more, but it's a perfect stepping stone. So that's actually a good thing if we could incrementally upgrade to something that stops the bleeding and still leaves people wanting more and is a good pathway to more. That is a win. That said, voting reform, like changing the whole voting method, the voter education, all of that is a huge lift. So we recommend just having a robust process, figuring out what people want, and then just going with that, as a one-step process. And if that is approval, then great. And if it's star, great. But that's a conversation each community should have.
I think I shorted Andre on the question, so thank you for your patience and your forgiveness.
No problem. So real quick, just before I ask my question, just to Susan's point, I've considered this a lot, and I think one of the core values that we should be looking at when we're looking at voting reform is that the voting system that we choose should allow the voter to accurately express their sentiment, right? And so it might be the case that like my first choice, I really like them, but my second choice, I'm kind of lukewarm on them. I don't love them. And then my third choice, I really don't like them that much, but I want to just have them as a backup option. Or maybe my first choice, I love them. My second choice, I'm also really in love, and so I can put those around. And then my third choice is just my backup vote. And that allows for the system to have accurate understanding and accurate information of the voter sentiment. And I think that's a really core, important value, in my opinion at least. So that's why I think that it's, star or any kind of scoring method is beneficial and has benefits over just straight approval, because it doesn't tell us what the sentiment was in terms of that. So that's to that. But and we can talk more maybe, or you can call. But my question was, so with star voting, it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if there was like more than like say 5 or 6, like say there's 10 candidates on the list, and you did want to score them all, you would necessarily have to score at least some of them the same score. Right? Have you considered that? Do you see that as any problem? Yes or no? Why? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so when I first got involved, that was a big open question of like, should it be a 0 to 5-star ballot? Should it be 0 to 9? Should it be 0 to 99? How much expressivity is helpful and how much is like too much, that's overwhelming, XYZ. So star voting with the 0 to 5-star ballot is already the most expressive ballot of any of the proposals on the table. And we actually ran some simulations looking at the accuracy of star voting if it was like star voting but 0 to 3, or star voting 0 to 4, 0 to 5, 0 to 6. And what we found was a bit of a curve where more expressiveness, more nuance on your ballot does lead to better accuracy to a point. But once you get up to 0 to 5, which is 6 options overall, that kind of plateaued. So it's good enough. And there's also a thing with like human opinion where we can only hold so much nuance in our memories at once. So there's a reason that phone numbers originally were like 7 digits, because that's kind of the most that humans can remember without having to be like, you know, checking the list of where your phone numbers are written down. So too much is too much, not enough is too little. Star voting is really designed to fit in that sweet spot of the actual level of nuance of natural human opinion.
Is there anybody I skipped over like I did? I want to make sure I didn't, because good. Yeah, so I got your question, yeah.
So this is more, excuse me, a question for the approval voter advocates. I noticed earlier in the explanation, and even right here on the icon, there's the disapprove option. I'm kind of throwing star voting under the bus by pointing this out, but like I would think if anything, there would seem a compromise with the two to add the like approve, neutral, and disapprove, where you at least still can have that divergence of saying, I'm neutral on Joe Biden because I don't want Trump, whatever, but if my real votes, my real people who I do approve, and I have that disapprove to tell them like take a hike, then that actually gives you that difference, right?
No abstain.
To help, right, as well as the abstain. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that if we really just want the simplicity of approval, it needs the dislike, in my opinion. But I wonder what the advocates would have to say about that.
Well, that's the element of expressiveness that's in your vision, right? That's being able, it's not just yay or nay or who I vote for, but it's also, there's more information there. I approve of this person, I don't approve of this person. I don't, and the question here is, what about, I want the thumbs down registered as well as the thumbs up.
Yeah, I have a little bit to say on that, but I want to let Alan take it.
Right, thanks, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gets pretty much to what Sarah was saying of that there's a range. So approval voting is basically star voting with only a 0 or 1. And then I think yes, no, abstain would be kind of 0, 1, 2, or negative 1, 0, 1. Kind of works out the same math-wise.
Yeah.
And then, so you gain fidelity as you go up in expressiveness up into a point, right? And I think that the big sell of approval voting is that it's such a simple change from where we are, and gets us so much benefit compared to where we are now. And if there's that candidate that's kind of on the edge, what they'll end up with is just a middling level of approvals instead of a lot of approvals, and they just won't be able to overcome somebody who is more exciting. Hopefully that makes sense.
Exciting, you said?
More that has more.
I don't know, I have one more question on that.
And before we go to the next question, so one of the things that's really important with voting reform is making sure that the ballot accurately reflects the will of the voter and the voter intent. That's kind of one of the most fundamental principles of, filling out a ballot. We need to respect that voter intent. And so star voting, 0 to 2 stars, totally valid option. That's kind of like a functional variation that would be just fine. But there's a proposal, yes, no, abstain, in which you're allowed this neutral, and if you leave somebody blank, that's a neutral middle score. So mathematically, -1 to +1 is the same as 0 to 2, And what that would mean is that, like, let's say you have Hitler before he's really started his career, nobody's heard of him, most people leave him blank. The people who have heard of him are like, oh my god, this person's dangerous, -1. But the average would still be really high. And so we do not want to have a system in which blank equals support. Blank should equal no support.
And on that note too, the milk toast candidate and the purple guy who might be good, but wouldn't that seem to me that that person could get elected more often than someone to the little to the left or right in a gerrymandered district? It might end up getting that milk toast guy, maybe not gerrymandered. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, so
repeat the question, if you would.
So to kind of summarize the question, and hopefully I'm paraphrasing you well, you were kind of saying if somebody's like second choice of a lot of people, but they don't really have their own strong base, that's kind of this kind of like milquetoast, whatever candidate, should they even win if they don't have a strong base of their own? And that is one of the reasons for the star voting runoff. So the star voting scoring round finds the candidate who's kind of the center of public opinion, who may well not have a huge base of their own. They may be just kind of ideologically in the middle. But that star voting runoff asks each and every voter of these two finalists, which one do you want to vote for? And so it does find that majority preferred front runner. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. The scoring round ensures that you have this strong consensus winner, and then the runoff adds this kind of like majoritarian gut check.
Yeah, question here.
Along the line of what the other gentleman was saying, an issue with approval voting, it seems to me, would be that you could have someone who is everybody's second choice and nobody's first choice be the winner. So that everybody loses out on having their first choice.
So in St. Louis, where approval voting is used currently, the way that they have it is an approval voting primary and then a top two runoff. And so that solves that problem, and that is kind of the main way that approval voting is recommended. You could just use approval voting in the general election. It is still highly accurate, like way more than our current system or ranked choice even. But we do like it with that top two runoff for that reason.
Yeah, here again, and we'll get some last couple of questions, and then I think we can continue informally. There's a plan to eventually wind up at a local establishment if anybody's interested. We'll give you information on that.
I guess quickly on that, like California already has a top two statewide system. So approval voting statewide in California would be a really, really natural upgrade where we could use approval voting in the primary, still have that top two runoff, and away you go.
Yeah, go just finish the complete thought. Yeah.
Well, so I also wanted to point out, I liked what was mentioned earlier about the struggle with star voting, where if you've got like 9 candidates but there's 5 stars total, you're gonna be matching even if you don't have like an actual equal liking of some candidates. So I'd wonder if like from the simulations it would make sense to me that you might be, if you're really studying this mathematically, you should be coming to some kind of a formula that's like, say for example, n+2, that would actually be like the number of candidates plus 2 should be the number of stars used or whatever, plus number of candidates plus n, we'll say, right? To say how much wiggle room you need given how much of an opinion you're really like asking for in detail from the voter.
So to kind of summarize, you're saying like maybe we should have more stars available on the ballot if there's more candidates and less if there's less candidates. And I think our answer to that comes back to just like the voter education piece. It's really important that people using the new system have a consistent format that works for all sorts of elections and don't have like a moving target where it looks different every time they go to vote. That could be confusing, it could be overwhelming. If we were using star voting in like you know, an internal organization where we can do like super high level, you know, training and stuff, that kind of thing's not a big deal, but when we're looking at municipal adoption at the statewide or local or federal level, that consistency is really important. So star voting's kind of one of the things I love about it, is I really think it is kind of the holy grail, where it works great for super competitive elections. It works great for using in primaries. It would work great within the partisan primaries. It would work great in a nonpartisan primary. It would work great in a general election. It would work great in a multi-winner proportional landscape. And all of those have the exact same voter interface.
Bruce, your question.
Senator, do you want to mention the democracy happy hour by any chance?
Sure, yeah. So if you go to equal.vote/events, we've got really a robust event page. We've got a lot of different things coming up all the time. So we have statewide chapter meetings for California that are, when is our California statewide chapter meeting?
So
It's
monthly.
it's every second.
every second Thursday. So our next Los Angeles meeting, or our next Los Angeles meeting is this Thursday. That happens every second Thursday. And then for California, that happens every first Monday.
Okay, so every first Monday of the month is our California Star Voting Equal Vote Coalition chapter meeting. And then every second Thursday, we actually have an LA chapter that's working on this Charter Reform Commission process and more. So we would love to have all of you there for both of those.
Those take place online?
Yeah, those are Zoom meetings. And then every Tuesday, we have something called the Open Democracy Discussion. And that's an amazing place where you can come, ask any question you might have, just talk about this stuff organically at length. It's super accessible for people who are super new to this topic. It's often has people who are super niche and knowledgeable as well. So it's a super fun place to just kind of get connected.
I have a question. As a moderator and as a Braver Angels representative, how would you say, have you looked at the makeup of your coalition in terms of its polarization politically or its alignments politically? How would you characterize the base of your organization?
Yeah, so when I first got involved and we kind of formed that research committee, and then from there we formed like a steering committee that was working on our local reform, we got about a year in really just nuts and bolts activism. And before we kind of started doing more like, okay, now we can breathe a little, let's get to know each other. And I found out we had one of each political party on our steering committee. We had like a Green Party person, a non-affiliated person, a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, a libertarian. And we're like, huh. And we've all like, we haven't disagreed on anything this whole time. We've just been working together really constructively. It blew my mind, especially because that was like 2016, so it was like a wildly polarized year. And it's been so powerful for me personally as an activist in these really polarizing times that I think can be very like disempowering. I think a lot of people feel hopeless, feel like there's no way to make a difference. To be involved with something like this where no matter what faction people are coming from, we have like the best people from that faction. We have people who just have, you know, real commitment to truth and to equality as a value, and to the idea that democracy, you know, for better or worse, we want to empower people to make collective decisions, and we trust that process, and we just want to make it better. So it's incredible.
Beautiful. Well, that validates my personal perspective and my Braver Angels perspective that there are a lot more of us in the center, and on the left of center, and on the right of center, and on the left, and on the right, and even left, right, than there are at the extremes. And the getting us together, I think, is an important thing, to do that work in a way that might have a very fundamental impact on the way we conduct our elections, which radiates down through the process. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, for, you know, people who identify as third party, it's like currently you're just completely marginalized. Third parties really don't stand a chance or don't have a fair shake for sure. And for people who identify as major party, you know, like I said, both major parties have lost the presidency because of vote splitting. Both major parties have been kind of hijacked by other factions. You know, we had like the whole Tea Party thing and the Bernie-Hillary divide and you know, MAGA versus traditional conservative. So even people who are like dyed-in-the-wool Republicans or Democrats have so much to gain from having their own political party, you know, having control of their own political party and their own political identity and not having to be such a big tent. So, breaking two-party domination, total win-win.
Yeah, there's some enthusiastic questions.
Yeah, go
jump
ahead.
in, and then I got into
I'm
that.
sorry, I cut you off. Can we get a copy of what you just said? I would love to use and post. That's just,
Yeah, thank you. So we're definitely filming this right now. We're gonna post the video at equal.vote/videos. Again, back on the website, also starvoting.org/videos. We're gonna feature this one and you're gonna be able to find it. We're on YouTube, we're on all of the different social media platforms. So everything that we do is accessible for people who are not here today, which I know a lot of people have asked.
It'll be available and you can quote it as what.
And if you want to be in the loop, if you go to equal.vote/join or just click that sign up button on any of the websites, that's the easy way to get on our email list. It'll invite you to volunteer if you want to, whether or not you have bandwidth to volunteer. That'll get you in the pipeline where you can get a one-on-one orientation. We can learn more about how you want to be involved. We have a Slack online workspace where people in different committees and different chapters are working together on action items that they set for themselves. So there's tons of ways to get involved. Join, go to the website. It's really a choose your own adventure and we'd love to have you there.
Choose your own adventure. And you could use ranked choice or approval, whichever you prefer. Yeah, we got a last question here, and if there's any last burning questions, we're going to cover them up, and then we'll wrap up with a nice moment. Yes, sir.
So that's kind of my question, is could people vote on this? I mean, has it been put on the ballot? You can have your choice. Which would you vote on?
Yeah, so there's an amazing YouTuber. He's a middle school social studies teacher turned YouTuber named Mr. B. And he did a series of like introducing each voting method with like in under 1 minute. And then he did a follow-up that was having his viewers vote on each voting method using each voting method. So it was like the meta election.
So good question.
And then from there, they did a follow-up of that video where it was actually breaking down a lot of the reasons that people had voted the way they did and the kind of talking points that people had about each method. And so we were invited to do a reacts video to that original video, which ended up being like one of our most compelling recruitment videos. A lot of our volunteers saw that and they were like, oh my god, I have to be involved. So yeah, super fun.
Well, I've certainly got that feeling from being here with you tonight, Sarah. Thank you very much. With that, if there's no other burning questions, let's take a moment and say thank you to Sarah again.
Really appreciate you stepping up and hosting, facilitating, and bringing that depolarizing brave Rangers perspective
Well,
too.
it looks like we're doing the same kind of work from two very different approaches. There are a couple representatives from Braver Angels here. We've got a table here. If you didn't sign up on the clipboard so that Sarah's organization has your contact information, please feel free to do that. I've got a couple my primed questions here. I'm not sure how they necessarily fit, but I'm certainly more enlightened myself. Is anybody who's feeling somewhat more optimistic about the process of maybe changing our voting process and it having an effect?
Ooh, that's almost everybody.
You know, and that really speaks to the work, if I may be so bold, that each of us is doing here on some level, whatever level you brought here that got you here tonight, and to hear this and get involved and think about it. That's a resonance that's going out. Some of you may get involved at a deeper level. There's an opportunity to get on the ground floor, work with Sarah and her people. So, here's what it says in my notes. The MC encourages people to meet each other and go to the tables for more information on each of these processes in Braver Angels. Takes a hand-raised poll of follow-up event. If you're interested in a possible follow-up event, who would be interested in some sort of, we're not asking for volunteers, I'm just trying to get a temperature check here. This could be bettervoting.com, you mentioned earlier. This is where we can actually try this process.
Yeah.
Right? You get together with a group that you're with or an organization you belong to, bettervoting.com, and you can actually do a poll. Last plug for Braver Angels. The bad news, it's a membership organization. It does cost to belong to the Braver Angels. But if you belong, you get to be able to actually say, I am a Braver Angel. And it's $12 a year. That's what we're charging now, right, to get people in. So it's a big financial commitment, but it's a lovely organization, and we got a couple people here who'd be happy to talk to you about it. Let's give Sarah a welcome. She signed in, talk to us. Doors close at 9. We're going to be out of here on time. And after party is a 10-minute walk to, which way is Tony's High Dive?
Tiny's High
Tiny's
Dive?
High Dive.
Tiny's High Dive.
And I want to take a second. Arend, if you could come up here.
Oh, yeah, Arend, yeah.
So Arend is the one who really spearheaded organizing this event. I'm with Bruce over here. But Arend is our LA chapter leader, one of our board members for Equal Vote, longtime California chapter leader, and just like a brilliant organizer, developer, and like multi-talented human that I'm super excited to get to work with and to work with in person right now. So yeah, big round of applause for Arend.
Thank you, Arend. Yes, and of course our host here at the who's here for the first time tonight at the Unearthed? Wow. Whoa. So if you're in the neighborhood, I know you'll be back, and here's to Unurban for hosting us, making it